Hi everyone, welcome to the CoLab, SpacetoCo's free monthly online sessions that are designed to assist those working in community venues to learn, upskill, and be inspired to do their work more effectively and efficiently. We hope you find these sessions useful for the important work you do in your local communities. For those that are watching this recording after this live event, hello, and we hope you get valuable knowledge from this session. My name is Shana Graham, and I'm part of the marketing team at SpacetoCo. My colleague Carmela Macalio, actually, this is her baby. She runs these webinars, but she is going on maternity leave soon. So please wish her well. And so you'll have me for a few months, which is great. I'm happy to be here. And a little bit about SpacetoCo. We are a marketplace for community spaces and council-led venues. So you can list your spaces, and also communities can look up what they need. But it's also a booking system tool where you can reduce your admin by 80%. So if you're interested, let us know. It's a very awesome tool. We also create and provide free resources for those working in community venues, such as the CoLab. And we're really excited for this session. Today we're talking about how community venues can respond to climate change. Climate change is arguably the biggest challenge we face as a society, and you might be thinking, how does a community venue, respond to that? What part do we play? And I'm hoping that this session will show you that everyone has a part to play, and we've got things that we can do. So I wanted to introduce you to our speaker, Dewy Sacayan, who is a climate advocate, public speaker, and sustainability strategist and consultant. She's got a background in law, politics, and economics, and has championed climate justice in international organizations and the private sector. She's currently based in Manila, Philippines, but she lived here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And she works as an international climate change law and policy specialist at the Asian Development Bank, and is also working towards her black belt in karate, which is great. She can kick butt, you know what I mean? She's also a really good friend of ours. Carmela and I actually met Dewy back in a youth group, so she's a very dear friend, a very incredible woman. So I'm just gonna give it up to you, Dewy, and you take the stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dewy Sacayan, and today I will be talking about a topic that is very dear to my heart and one that I have used as my North Star in hopes of creating an impactful career. Today, I will speak to you about climate change, specifically where we are now, where we must be heading as one community, and how we will sustain the environment for intergenerational equity. Next slide, please, Shannon. I know that we already have the agenda for the whole hour, but this is, I guess, how I want to structure my talk for the next 30 minutes. So I'll begin by introducing myself again. I think that it's very important that you can visualize the spaces I have been in and the ways in which I have tackled climate change over the years. Then I will set the scene as to the disasters that we are facing today and its impacts to biodiversity, to economy, and to lives, to drill down on why this conversation is important on a community venue level. Then I will deep dive on some of the policies and initiatives that help combat climate change locally, nationally, and internationally, so many different levels. In doing so, I want to also prompt some discussions, some ideas, and also co-design some tangible actions for the community. So we'll do 3 and 4 together. And then after that, I'll pass back on to Shanna so we can do to Carmela to do our Q&A. Okay. So next slide, please, Shanna. So as I said, my name is Dewy, and I'm calling you from Manila. I call the Philippines and New Zealand my home, and I did so in my pepeha. Specifically, Mayon volcano is in Bicol, where my papa is from. Ilog Pasig is in Manila, where I am based, specifically in Quezon City, which is in the north side. I have a legal background, and I have been in the climate space for the last 10 years now. I started off as a litigation lawyer for about 6 years. That was really fun, and I feel like advocacy has always been what drives me. I am also a sustainability strategy consultant and a climate advocate. My background educationally is in law, politics, and economics, specifically focusing on energy economics from the University of Auckland. As Shanna mentioned, I have lived in New Zealand. I lived in New Zealand for 17 years and traveled around here and there, and then currently now based in the Philippines. While I was in New Zealand, I was volunteering for this group called Generation Zero, where I served as a private sector engagement lead during the Zero Carbon Act campaign. And then after that, I helped with the governance board as one of the co-chairs. And then related to climate change and kind of what has been driving a lot of the conversations that I have had on the international level is the fact that I've been a youth delegate at the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. I've gone to 3 COPs now. The first one was in Lima, Peru, when I was 19, I think, 2014. After that was Marrakesh, and then most recently Dubai. I also started my journey in climate change because of Super Typhoon Haiyan or Yolanda. And so because of the disaster risk reduction component of that, I was also sent to Sendai, Japan as a youth delegate. Okay, I'll want to move on to the scene setting. Okay, so first of all, I think that we are all now aware that our planet is facing an existential crisis that requires urgent and collective action. The effects of climate change can be seen and felt all around the world, from rising sea levels to melting glaciers, extreme weather events, and loss of biodiversity. And just in the last year or so, we have seen the world's most extreme environmental and climate-exacerbated disasters within New Zealand. So the photos that you can see now are from Cyclone Gabrielle. This cyclone flooded Auckland and the East Coast. Entire regions were underwater, and some were even cut off due to damaged roads. So next slide, please. So some businesses that were slowly recovering from the impacts of climate change have now fully collapsed due to flooding. The government and insurance companies are now expecting to cover close to about $1 billion in repairs, and communities have come together to help rebuild what they can. Next slide, please, Shanna. Here in the Philippines, sadly, news of floodings, storms, and super typhoons are now so common that we've become desensitized to news of death due to flash floods and hundreds and thousands of people living in evacuation centers. I didn't add a photo here, but from April to June this year, it was boiling here in the Philippines. Our temperatures even reached up to 50 degrees Celsius at one point. And last week, we had Super Typhoon Karina. Super Typhoon Karina is one of the most long-lasting rain that we've had this year. It rained for 12 hours straight. I was woken up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and it didn't stop until about 5 p.m. that night. And that was just constant throughout the day. And people up until today are still living in evacuation centers. Schools actually started back yesterday. And a week before school starts, there's this program called Escuela Brigada, which is essentially when teachers and parents and some students come together to clean their schools. And unfortunately, for some schools that have already been cleaned, they'd had to do it again. And some of them couldn't even do it properly because of the fact that some schools or some venues were used as evacuation centers. And I want to highlight that, particularly as we talk about the fact that this is, primarily for community venues, because this is where people convene together. And here in the Philippines, my reality is that people use venues, particularly community venues such as schools, churches, halls, not so much community co-working spaces yet as evacuation centers. But I do know that some halls or some co-working spaces have also now opened their doors as well to try and actually accept relief goods. And those relief goods are then sent out to the communities that need them most. Okay, so if we could change our slide, please. So I wanted to show these grim images because I think that it's important for us to care and humanize, the people who are actually in the front lines of climate change. Humans are both the culprits and the victims in this climate crisis, and we are not immune to the effects of climate change. Next slide, please. But I also think that it's the people who cause climate change the least, such as children and animals, that are in the front lines and are impacted the most. And these changes are already having a significant impact on our communities, our societies, and our natural environment, and even how these children are facing their realities today, right? Like, as I said, here in the Philippines, children cannot go to schools because their schools have been flooded or are being used as evacuation centers, or they're needed at home to actually help clean up their houses that have been flooded. If we could change your slide. I'm going to go through a little bit of science here because we need to be factual when it comes to climate change. So if you already know this, please bear with me. So the IPCC, or the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change, said that we need to keep global warming well below 1.5 degrees in order to avoid a point of no return. And as of 2022, we are already past 1.1 degrees Celsius globally. Now, the threshold of 1.5 is extremely important because if we exceed it, then the scientists say that we will trigger tipping points. Next slide, please, Shanna. So tipping points are a series of environmental occurrences that will lead to the collapse of Earth systems and further loss of biodiversity. So it's essentially saying that if we reach the point of no return and the tipping points begin, then life is not going to be the same as we know it, and the future as to what our present and future generations are going to inherit is not going to be the same as the present that we're living in now. So currently, because of climate change, permafrost in the Arctic and the Antarctic are thawing, and that could release about 1,400 billion tons of carbon, which further exacerbates global warming. As temperature rises, the Greenland ice sheets, which is at the middle top of the picture on the left-hand side, they continue to melt at a pace which causes sea level rise all around the globe. As the sea levels continues to rise, the Atlantic Meridional, AMOC is what we call it, AMOC, which acts as a conveyor belt that redistributes heat throughout the Earth's climate system, will weaken currents. If the AMOC continues to weaken, then rainfall will reduce in the Sahel region in the Middle East. So that's right in the middle of that picture, which will hamper crop production and disrupt seasonal monsoons in Asia. Or in other words, as what we're seeing now, more cyclones in the Asian region and drier conditions, or warmer and hotter conditions towards the Middle East. So disrupting seasonal monsoons will force farmers in Asia and South America to change their farming practices or move. And this will inevitably affect food security and impact livelihoods of people around the world. And once again, the disruption of monsoon seasons coupled with deforestation in the Amazon forest, so on the left-hand side of that photo, will then trigger more droughts and bushfires in the Amazon, which, as we all know, is our lungs. So it's the world's lungs. And over the last 10 years, the Amazon rainforest experienced 3 once in 100-year droughts and bushfires. And some of them was actually policy pushed under the Bolsonaro administration, and some of them were just specifically because of illegal logging. And so some of you may be thinking, so what, right? The Arctic, the Antarctica, the AMOC, the Sahel region, all of those places are so far away from us, it will probably not affect us. However, these ice sheets are Earth's air conditioning. And as I said, the Amazon is the world's lungs. And unlike the air conditioning and the heat pumps that we're used to, we cannot turn these on or off. These are a part of our Earth's cycles. And so without these, in parts of the world, leveling Earth's temperature, we risk overheating our cities and degrading our air quality, which then endangers our own food systems and species. So in short, if we act business as usual, we will risk the quality of life of our future generations, and they will not see the Earth as we see it now. So next slide, please. So this brings us to one big statement, right? The reason to act now is very clear, and the time to do so is shrinking. The good news is that there is hope. We have the ability to take action, and we are not alone in this fight. So, in this next part, I want to just talk about the different levels of action that we can take and focus a little bit of policies because I'm a policy nerd based on my background. Next slide, please. Okay, so, and you can click the next as well. So, the other side. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so I want to focus on New Zealand primarily and its place in the international climate action space. So, firstly, New Zealand is known for being clean and green. We are most well known around the world for being staunchly nuclear free. We are the first country to give legal personhood to a river, the Waikato River, just so that it has the same rights as humans do. And I believe 85% of our energy is sourced from renewable sources. It may have gone up since I last lived there, but 85% is amazing. Despite all of this, New Zealand isn't perfect. So New Zealand is fifth in the OECD for having the highest carbon footprint per capita. And as a country, we are very car dependent, much like the Philippines. Like that picture that you can see on the right-hand side is probably very similar to what my morning commute to my work here in Manila looks like. And I know it sounds hyperbolic, but in New Zealand, Auckland is already quite well known for having, different types of public transport system, and yet people are also still very car dependent. And so I can only imagine what that might be in other parts of the country. So next slide, please. We are very responsible, definitely, to do more. And we must act on all levels to affect long-lasting change at pace. So I'd like to share a few examples of what has worked well for us in climate action across all levels. And I'd like to start with the international level. So the latest COP, or Conference of the Parties, which is administered by the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, was held in Dubai. And it had two main highlights from my perspective. First is the focus on energy transition, and the second was loss and damage. In particular, we've set up the loss and damage fund. It's now coming to what the new quantified goal would be, and making sure that there's money behind what that goal is. So the Loss and Damage Fund was set up to ensure that countries who are at the front lines of climate change can tap into some money that will help them adapt to the impacts of climate change. Countries and private institutions are now urged to pledge investment in the fund. And New Zealand is actually one of the first countries to pledge $1.3 billion, which we call the Climate Emergency Response Fund. Now, because of rising inflation, the Ukraine war, the Palestinian genocide, the cost of energy has increased, and the bombs that have been set off so far have actually added to global warming. Some countries in other parts of the world see that as an opportunity and an impetus to act on and invest in renewable sources of energy, as it will mean that high investment today will eventually lower operating costs in the future, so that we're not just relying on finite sources like coal. And so from an international level, just to prompt some discussions, please feel free to put this in the chat, but how might our community and our community venue come together to influence international climate talks such as COPs? How might climate finance impact your work? And within this context of community venues, how might we actually raise further awareness in terms of what that might look like by way of climate finance? Could the community support or ally with other NGOs internationally that are pushing for these changes? And so I'd love to really find out more about what kind of ideas you have in terms of how you can act from an international level. Let's move on to the next. Okay, so many countries and international organizations are now lobbying one another to pledge to the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. Bit of a mouthful, but we call it the FFNP Treaty. I believe that energy transition could be a good theme and focus area for a community venue that is obviously very reliant on ensuring that there's power and energy for the communities and the businesses that you serve. And investing in renewables will have a huge potential on creating long-term impact in operations. The Pacific Island countries have recently signed on to the treaty, and they urgently call on others to do the same. Perhaps the community can even think about how it might support this treaty and call on our government to also sign on. And so, again, just to prompt some discussions, feel free to put this in the chat if you'd like. But how might the community and the community venue be a signatory to the treaty? It's open to communities to actually sign on to. It's open for businesses to sign on to. It's open for individuals to sign on to. Because at the end of the day, it's a global mobilization towards ending and phasing out fossil fuels that we really need in order to stop or at least try and slow down global warming. And so again, what role could the community play in the energy transition? Okay, let's move on to the next level, which is national level. Okay, so as I said, the youth-led climate advocacy group that I have volunteered for is called Generation Zero. Some of you may already be aware of it. Generation Zero have successfully lobbied for the Zero Carbon Act. The Zero Carbon Act was a 3-year campaign, but obviously the planning for it, etc., was way before that, and it was passed in November 2019. The Zero Carbon Act statutorily set up the Climate Commission, which provides independent and science-based advice to the government. It will also provide advice on how we can meet our emissions budget target, such as banning any new oil exploration permits that was announced under the Ardern administration. And the road to getting the Zero Carbon Act was quite challenging. As I said, it took us 3 years to lobby and talk to basically everyone who would listen to us about what this law could mean for New Zealand. From drafting the bill, we knew that we needed to team up with other businesses and community groups to collectively call on the government to pass the law. And as the private sector engagement lead of the campaign back in from 2017 to 2019, we ran different campaigns like getting an open letter signed by over 250 businesses calling for the law, as it will bring business certainty. We also ran an Elbow Your Elders campaign. So it's like elbowing your elders so it's the students elbowing their elders to vote with their future in mind, and to use their influence and use the fact that their generation are the ones who can vote, unlike the students, to actually vote with climate change in mind and contact MPs directly. And so I understand that the New Zealand unicameral system in the parliament is much simpler compared to the Philippines bicameral system. It just means that here in the Philippines, you've got the Congress coming together to draft the bill, and then it gets sent to the Senate. So there's the two levels that it must go to before it becomes law. And so that is obviously quite bureaucratic in the way that we create laws and pass laws, and it's much simpler in New Zealand. Also, on top of that, we're very lucky in New Zealand that some MPs can even be our friends. One of the MPs right now is quite well known, even went to law school with me. So, she's one Instagram message away sometimes, which is fantastic. And we now live in a reality where that and accessing decision makers is just so easy that we should be participating in democracy, and all the options for us to do so are literally in our fingertips. And so looking around, the room within your community venue, looking at the people who are, within your community, I bet that you see a lot of influencers who can do the same, right? So I urge each and every one of you to use your influence, leverage law and policy from a national level to create systemic change. Partner with other communities, partner with other youth groups, with NGOs, if you must, so that you can pass knowledge and allow them to have a voice. And so again, put it in the chat if you'd like, but on a national level, how might the community use their influence with decision makers to create systemic change. Could the community venue host some of these, what we call our parties, parties for writing submissions, that is. And so in Auckland, when I was still living there, we would actually partner with some community venues, some of them businesses who would open their offices for us to actually host some of the submission writing parties is what we call them. There were even bike raves that were held, and one of the ways in which we tap into ensuring that there's lots of people who to support that would be by going to our communities, using community venues to actually help us advertise for such events, and then also partner with community venues to actually co-design some actions. And so I think that on a national level, there's a lot that can be done. And so again, I urge you to start thinking about what might those tangible actions look like. Okay, and finally, onto the next level, which is the local or city level. Okay, so very importantly, and we have done this over and over again as Generation Zero, we partner and work with the local council to affect change. So as I've said already, and as you know, last year, Cyclone Gabrielle happened. And after the cyclone, I was actually on the phone with the Auckland Council's Chief Sustainability Officer at the time, who understood that responding to the recent floods and cyclones must begin with a robust climate strategy as well as a budget to implement that. And he wanted to open public consultations about the budget, and he wanted to get Generation Zero's support in reaching the youth, because Generation Zero mobilizes young people to engage with decision making. And so how we do that is that we break down jargon in the regulations. We assess the budgets. We look at what it will actually help implement for us, but also what we want it to actually provide for future generations, and what kind of investments it will create today that will actually impact how we live in a more, I guess, low carbon way. And so how we then mobilize other people to engage with that is that we create quick submit forms, we create infographics. During the mayoral elections, this is quite outdated now, but we would create scorecards, as you can see on the lower right left. And those scorecards will just help young people actually understand what type of policies from a climate perspective these candidates actually or where they rank. We also use social media to reach out to younger generations. We support different school strike for climate. And so I believe the one on the left-hand side, bottom left-hand side, is from Nelson. And so that's one where we supported the climate strikes throughout the country. I remember for the first one, I had a very long lunch so that I could go to the school strike, and I was one of the traffic controllers. And so, yeah, that was very fun. It was really amazing to see young people come out in droves to push for climate action. And also very amazing to see young people from my school do so. And then on the top right-hand corner, that's actually our parking day. And so that little action right there is very community-centric. We basically paid for that parking slot for the whole day, and we ended up changing the way people use that space. Instead of it being used as a space for a private car to just take over for hours and hours of the day, we brought it back to the community. And so we showed that this space on a public road is not for is not a way to just get money, right? It's a way for people to actually come out, make the city more vibrant, but also come out and show the fact that these public roads are for people. And so you'll see that there's a picnic going on there. Sometimes we have some board games out and about where people can just stop by and wind down. And this usually happens in the city center, where we believe people should be taking or using public and active transport instead of coming out to drive, because at the end of the day, the city should be walkable. It should be friendly to families. It should be safer for young people and also for adults alike. And then on top of that, it's a space for people, not so much just for cars. And so those are just some of the actions that we've done on a local and city level. And so I didn't put prompts here, but as you already know, put it in the chat in terms of other ideas that you may have in terms of how you might do that within your community. If their community venue has some parking out front, could you maybe change the use of that for, try it for a couple of days a week or even just one day a week, and see if people can actually come together and use that space more for leisure rather than for parking. Could there be bike days within your community and the people that use the community venue? Bike days wherein people would actually gamify how they get to their offices. And so I think that there's lots of opportunity from a local level, and I can only imagine the type of actions that can be done on that part. Okay, so next slide, please. Sorry. These are my prompts. So I won't go through the prompts again, but I will just go through some of the photos on the left-hand side. We've got the bike rave, which happened, it would always happen in Auckland. I think there were some that was held as well in Christchurch before the quakes, and I think they're just wanting to revive that once again. And then we also held art competitions as well. And the art competitions is one way in which we could visualize the climate crisis for young people, but also visualize the future that they want. And so, again, mobilizing the people, mobilizing our communities to come together. These events were all advertised by different businesses, community venues, in schools. And so there's lots of ways in which we could actually all engage and support these events all together. So next slide, please. I'm wrapping up now. Okay, so overall, I hope that you were able to see how climate action can permeate across all levels of society, from international to national to the local levels as well. If there's anything you took away from my discussion and sharing today, I hope that it is the fact that New Zealand is already at the front lines of the climate crisis. But we are proactively fighting back through our solutions-focused actions in service of those who are most affected. So I want to leave you with two famous quotes and a challenge. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And we are called to hear the cries of the earth and the cries of the poor. And so again, how are you going to go together to help hear the cries of the earth and the cries of the poor? Maraming salamat po. Thank you very much for listening to me. Over to you again, Shanna.
Oh, thank you so much, Dewy. That was incredible. That was actually quite sobering as well. I think Carms and I were actually just saying like how how scary a lot of this stuff is, and but it's also really cool to hear that there's a lot of hope and there's a lot of practical things, especially using relationships and a lot of things actually that community venues can do. Like I wrote down like events. Carms put something up in the chat about maybe running events to put a spotlight on climate change, or even placemaking things like the parking lot, the parking day idea that you have had. And Chelsea, you've actually been putting up a lot about what your organization is doing, Community Waitakere. And she had a question actually about how, maybe specifically, how would you be able to make a space more sustainable and eco-friendly? So I think Chelsea's got a co-working space that she would like to make more sustainable and eco-friendly. Are there any, I guess, things in a physical kind of area or anything like that?
Thank you very much, Chelsea. And everyone, I've just had a look at our chat and it's been pumping. Okay, so from a co-working space, right? So I have a huge focus on energy transition, and I think that it is one of the most effective ways in which we could actually create a more eco-friendly and truly sustainable space in Aotearoa and across the earth. Across the world. And so energy transition, I would say, is one of the most effective ways. And so I don't know whether your co-working space is already powered by renewable energy, as in sourced from solar PVs. If that's already the case, then amazing. And if it's not the case, then how could that be part of the long-term strategy for your co-working space to actually invest in little by little, so that you could actually power the rest of the people who are working in that space with renewable energy. So in my offices now, here in Manila, so one of the buildings is fully covered by solar panels, and as far as I know, we don't have batteries in here. And the reason why that's the case is because obviously people are working throughout the day. So people are currently, fully using the power that the solar PVs are generating as we work. And it's been amazing because at the end of the day, I actually am incentivized to come to the office and work from here because, one, I know that I'm going to be saving by way of energy costs instead of working from a cafe or working from somewhere else that's not powered by solar PVs. I'd much rather go to my office and actually use free power that's powered by the sun. And then two, because I'm incentivized to come to the office, I think that it also makes for a more vibrant community here. I have found that because of the fact that flexibility is very important nowadays. Not many people are actually coming to the office to work, but I find that because I've been coming to work quite a lot, my friends and my coworkers are now also incentivized as well to have working days wherein we're all here. And so that could be one way. Another way could be waste. And so it's one of the most simplest ways in which we can change our operations and change the way we impact landfills in general. And so firstly, from a waste perspective, could there be a way in which you could challenge the rest of the people who are working within that space to be zero waste for a week? And if that's the case, then that would be fantastic. We tried that in one of the offices that I worked at in Auckland. We tried to be zero waste, and I think we were doing so well up until we had I think we had some merch come through, and so we ended up with lots of boxes and packaging and everything else. And so, so that was quite amazing. Another way in which we tried to be zero waste was actually by composting. This was a little bit more difficult from an office setting, but we made it work. So in the law firm that I worked for beforehand, we would separate our, because unfortunately in Auckland, we still don't separate food waste from other wastes. And so we would separate our food wastes. I contacted Nespresso because we were using that, and they gave us a box where we could actually throw all of the pods, and then we would send it back to them for them to recycle and to reuse the aluminium. And so the food waste, we would actually give that. There's a community online, I'm trying to search it right now, where you can partner with communities who need compost for their farms, or just general compost bins. Searching that right now, and I'll put it in the chat as soon as I find out. But yeah, those are some ideas that you may be interested in implementing.
Awesome. And I think Pauline had asked a question about, learning how community groups can positively impact climate change. And I think one of the things that you said was to, partner up with other groups that are actually doing work in this space. So I guess a specific question to that would be, what are some groups that you recommend us, partnering up with or looking into? Like you said, you've got the, was it Generation Zero? Is that what? Yeah. Or are there any other kind of organizations that we should maybe put on our tabs? I guess, yeah.
Yeah. So this is a great question, and one that I really like, because I think when I was still at university and even when I started at Generation Zero, I was very pleased to see how so many of our communities just want to partner with us, and they actually want to, host us. One of the businesses where we would hold our meetings, we would meet on Tuesday nights, and obviously we didn't have a space to meet, and so we had this business open their offices for us to work at, which was amazing. So definitely partnering with youth groups would be number one. How I found out about Generation Zero was actually through a friend of a friend. And so nowadays, it's very easy to find out who they are and where they're based through social media. I would definitely urge for people to also focus on helping Pacifica and Indigenous groups within your communities. And so some that I can think of from the top of my head would be the Pacific Climate Warriors, For the Culture, 40K, and then also Te Arafatu. Those are just some of the most influential and brothers and sisters who I have had the pleasure of working with or mobilizing with, and if they have the partnerships that we sometimes have direct access to as Generation Zero, then I'm sure that they could be more effective. I mean, they're super effective now, but imagine what that partnership could look like. On top of that, there are lots of other community groups from the university level that are wanting to obviously scale what their advocacies might look like. So say, for example, we had, this was back in 2017 now, but we had fossil-free UOA, wherein we were pushing to divest the university. So the mother organization for that is 350 Aotearoa. So they're also a really good group to partner with. They often have events as well that they like to host for the communities, and so it'd be good to have the community venues step up and actually host some of those.
That's awesome. And you've had time in Melbourne as well. Are there any Australian, I guess, counterparts to those organizations?
Yeah, unfortunately, when I was living in Melbourne, I didn't have the chance to actually come out to the community as much as I wanted to. To be fair, I was only in Melbourne for about 6 months before I had to move back to Manila. Unfortunately, I don't know any from the top of my head. However, when I was working at one of the law firms, there were lots of different clinics that my colleagues were hosting from a climate justice perspective. I think that some of them were hosted from a university level. But let me search some or get in touch with others, and I can get back through Shana, and Shana can then pass it back to the team.
That's awesome. Thanks, Dewy. I think we'll there's any other questions, please feel free to put it in the chat. I'm sure Dewy, we're gonna send out an email to everybody with these slides and Dewy's slides and all of these awesome groups to look into. We'll work on that for you. But if there's any other questions, feel free, and we'll answer them hopefully in that email as well. But thank you so much, Dewy, for joining us. You've been incredible, and I've just learned so much, and I'm sure everyone's learned a lot. And good luck with all of the work that you're doing over there in Manila. Thank you so much. All right. So we'll just move on. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We've got more resources on SpacetoCo.co /guide. So there's a lot of things for community venues to upskill. Otherwise, the next collab session is on Tuesday, the 27th of August, and it's about how to plan and run an event on a budget. And so it's quite cool. I mean, we've talked about climate kind of advocacy, and if you wanted to run an event, this is probably a really great one to come to see how you would actually run an event on a budget, especially in community venues where funds might be hard to come by. But hopefully you'll be there next month. Thank you so much for joining us. And thanks again to Dewy. Hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next month.